Sega Skanagoa, Dr. Joseph Martin. Donagalenkwa is my Mohawk given name. Donagalenkwa means he who lives in two worlds, the Mohawk and First Nations world, and the non-native world of today. Our person that we want to revere and hold up today and hold up in the light is Joseph Onasenkenrat, and he was a Mohawk chief who was born September 4th, 1845 in Kanesatake, which is now nearby Oka, Quebec, and was poisoned and murdered on February the 7th and died February the 8th, 1881 at the tender age of 36 years. Now, I do know a lot about this man and the village of Kanesatake and the history of 500 years of divide and conquer and illegitimate land grabs and so on, because I happen to have lived there between the years of 1972 and 1988 and ended up doing my PhD at the University of Toronto in the anthropology department on the ethnohistory and the culture of our people, the Mohawk of Kanesatake. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview here, of course, of the character of the man known as Joseph Swan. Swan or white feather, and this is a white eagle feather I'm holding here. Joseph Swan was a very devout spiritual man as a Mohawk, and also a very intelligent man who was quick-witted, easy to learn languages. He obviously was raised as a Mohawk, and he learned Latin and French and other languages as well, including Hebrew and Aramaic. And Joseph was elected, given the deer horns, as we say, on July the 25th, 1868, at the tender age of 23 years, because he was recognized by the clan mothers of the Kanien'kehá:ka, or the Mohawk of Kanesatake, as one who could lead the people in truth, peace, power, righteousness, and justice, which is our way from the Garanagoa, or the great law of peace, given to us by Deganawida, the great peacemaker, who lived and came to us before the time of the invasion 500 years ago by the non-native people from Europe. Now, Chief Joseph Onasenkenrat, or White Swan, we can call him, or White Feather, was very much early on in his life involved in setting up or helping the Sulpicians, that's Les Messieurs des Sulpices, a French kind of Catholic order that came to our Turtle Island early on in the 1600s and all through the 1700s. He had been somewhat involved. In fact, he was hired as a secretary by the church, the Sulpician Church in Oka, which is on Lake of Two Mountains. And when he was elected at the age of 23, though, as the chief, he had also been experiencing, having been the secretary there, a lot of cruelty and, in fact, torture by the Sulpician fathers and the people there towards himself personally, and also towards all the Mohawk of Kanesatake. In fact, he was certain, as time went on, that they were inevitably trying to starve the people and take away all their rights and freedoms, and they were intentionally doing this in order to undermine them and keep them impoverished. Those are his words. So he went to Ottawa, to the government there, to the head of Indian Affairs in 1869, and he asked the government of Canada, through that person, to give back all the traditional lands to the Mohawk that they had been living on for at least 8,000 years, and probably more like 15,000 years, we now know from archaeological evidence. Of course, the government of Canada did nothing and did not return the lands to the Mohawk. And so when Chief Joseph Swan went back, he rounded up a group of 40 of his armed Mohawk members there in Kanesatake, and they went and they cut down a large elm tree. Now, the Sulpicians had forbidden the Mohawk to cut down any trees, to use any of the land for growing corn, beans, and squash, which are our traditional agricultural produce that we grow for ourselves, along with sacred tobacco. And although the fact is the Sulpicians and the local French people have been cutting down trees for their own benefit, not just for firewood, but for building houses and so on. And because the Mohawk were forbidden to cut down the tree, Chief Joseph Swan was making a statement for which he and 4 others were actually put in jail. The police were called from Chochake or Montreal and put Chief Joseph and others in jail. They were released because there was actually, nothing that could be done about that. It was just an attempt at intimidation, as is usually the case. And so what happened was, as a result of this, Chief Joseph Swan decided that he was going to, on the threat of excommunication by the Catholic Church and the Sulpicians, decide that he was going to become a Methodist. And he contacted a number of Methodist pastors, one English and one French, in that region, and actually trained as a Methodist minister. He is known as a very devout, spiritual, conscientious, justice-oriented peacemaker, and he gave sermons in the Methodist churches in the other Mohawk villages of Ganawage, near Chochake or Montreal, Akwesasne, which is near Cornwall Island, and a number of other Mohawk villages. He traveled around preaching to the people. Throughout his short life of 36 years, he also did translate the entire Bible, at least as far as he could, into Mohawk, from Latin and to Mohawk, and also using the French versions as well. He got as far as the Epistle to the Hebrews in the New Testament Gospels before he was unfortunately murdered. Now, I'll explain just briefly how that happened. On February the 7th of 1881, the Sulpician order and the priests were having a ball, a social occasion in Chochake, as we call it, or Montreal, and he was invited. And one of the priests, or a number of the priests, purposefully poisoned what he was drinking and the food as well. And he went home that evening and told his wife he was feeling very, very ill. And he was dead by the next morning, which was February the 8th, 1881. Suspiciously enough, one of the Sulpician fathers or priests came by with a horse and sleigh and took his body the very next morning from the place where he was staying. And that was his house, and took the body back to Montreal. And so there's something very suspicious about this. But while I was doing my ethno-historical research for my PhD on our Mohawk people in Kanesatake, and indeed all our Mohawk people on First Nations, the Haudenosaunee, the Six Nations, I came across a lot of evidence, both written and verbal, that during the American Civil War, which is 1865 to 1868, the Sulpician priests had gone down over the medicine line, the border, to the Union camps in the north of America, that area, just, of course, that would be New York State, and had gotten blankets infested with smallpox, and many of the Union soldiers, or some of the others, soldiers had died of smallpox, and there was a lot of that going on during the Civil War. And these Sulpician priests gave these blankets, who they knew were infected and infested with smallpox, gave them to the men, women, and children and elders of Kanesatake, the Mohawk people, and many of them did die. Some of them had to be removed to Gibson, Ontario, to near Ballard, near 6 Mile Lake. And those are the ones who became Protestants. They were so fed up with the Catholic Church. Now, I could regale you with lots of other true stories of divide and conquer that's been used by any of the religious Protestants as well as Catholics, of course. And the whole point being is that self-determination and the right to have your own spiritual traditions and keep them is something that's important for all First Nations and indeed, in fact, all peoples of the world from any background, culture, language, and religion, major religion or indigenous religion. And these traditions are sacred and sacrosanct. And although we seem to be losing quite a few of these languages and cultures, it's been my lifelong career as an anthropologist, as a professor, as a researcher, and as a clinician to bring back a lot of these medical, historical, and cultural traditions, beliefs, and ceremonies. Now, I therefore would like to suggest to all of you, particularly those of you listening in Canada, and also, of course, the rest of you abroad, to realize that the re-indigenization of our consciousness towards the heartfelt understanding of peace, power, true power related to all our relations in Mother Earth and the elements, and righteousness, justice, and truth, honesty, integrity, kindness, respect, unity, and love, first and foremost of all, will bring back, with the courage that we need and the hope above all, to bring back a new civilization that incorporates and is open to all of us, where we have the rights and of responsibilities to self-determination. This would be the true reconciliation that our nation, Kanesatake or Canada, and all the nations need at this time to move forward with positive hope, success, and unity in the 21st century. Joseph Swan, his spirit, Onasenkenrat, is still with us now. I hope his story is inspiring to you. He was a man of good faith, very devout, very spiritual man, always being kind and helpful to the widows and orphans, the elders and the children. It's gratifying for us now to know, and I've been somewhat just peripherally involved, that our own Ganyenga Aga, the Mohawk people, now do have our own schools, from JK, SK, all the way up through public and high school, and up to Cégep in Quebec and other places in Ontario, New York State, to higher education. I highly encourage all the First Nations people listening to this to go for higher education. And as you do, remember to still stay in your heart identified with our true culture, our true language, our true nature, and being unkwehuwe, meaning true-hearted people, and following the unkwehuwe neha, or the true-hearted good red road. Dr. Joseph Martin, Donna Galenqua, giving you all love and blessings and hope above all to carry forward and be true to your heart in simplicity and in beauty and walking the good red road with joy in your hearts.